Good evening, and I want to really first thank David for joining me today. It's a thrill to have you here. I really appreciate that you're here and to talk.
My pleasure.
Really,
check
really
my
great.
own mic.
I'm going to start with just, the program. And, the programming is an art form. And you've played a lot of programs in your day, and you're a wonderful programmer. And maybe just let's start with tonight. How do you conceive of tonight's program? Like just from when did it happen? Was it last year?
Well, the program in some ways, what I try to do is find an order for the pieces so that one piece doesn't kill the next one. Right? Sometimes if you play, there are certain pieces that are so powerful that you almost don't want to play anything after it.
Right.
That it's almost better, hey, this is it. And sometimes that order is not chronological. There was a time when you go to a concert and you would get some early music and then some Baroque music, some classical music, and then finish off with some South American. But that really doesn't always work. So I usually choose by whether I think it's going to work for the audience in this order, and also how I feel. When I finish one piece, I don't want to play this next one.
Right.
So I jump it. So this program has been through quite a few changes and processes. Usually in the programs, I usually include something that's written now. I've played some of your music, different times. Because of something that happened this year, it's not like that for this year, but it doesn't matter because I played lots of contemporary music by friends, etc., and I love doing it. But the piece that I had that was going to be for this program, it's not ready.
Right.
That is, the composer didn't finish writing everything for me, so it'll be in next year's program instead.
Right.
And you get to hear a partita by Bach instead.
Well, since it was his birthday yesterday.
Exactly. There you go.
Great. And well, just to continue on the programming, what advice would you give just in general for young performers in programming, say, that have their graduation recitals? How should they what in general are some good points?
Yeah. I think that for the young students that are kind of aspiring professionals, there is a big problem because their programs tend to sound, when they do their first big concerts, they tend to sound like an exam.
Right.
Because those are the pieces that they've learned, the pieces that are necessary for an exam. And it's not necessarily a good order nor a good program for an audience. So I think sometimes they don't have any choice because they have to pass their exams. Or it's either exams or competition programs.
Ah, yeah.
A lot of the young guys and girls, they're really, they're going for the competitions. I mean, it's a one way for them to get their career developed and open doors and things. And hopefully if they win, they'll get a bit of money so they don't have to work so much, And I did some and they were very helpful. But there are certain pieces that work really well in competitions. But you don't want to listen to 3/4 of an hour of that kind of music.
Right,
There's other stuff, and that maybe is not so good for a competition because it's not showy or whatever. But for a concert, it's beautiful. And so there's an awful lot of this people going out and they think they're going to show what they can do, but actually they show you what they can't do sometimes because they're under so much pressure.
Interesting.
So I think they should choose programs. Say if they're finished their masters, they should probably play what they played in their senior recital, 3 years ago, and they would probably do a better concert. That's not for everybody,
Right,
but
right.
for a lot of times I've seen that happen, and unfortunately, we probably all made the same mistake at some point.
Right.
But I think it's this thing that you do a concert so that the audience enjoys what you're doing, not to show them who you are.
Yes, you have a wonderful, but David, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to plug his blog. He has a fantastic blog, and you actually mentioned that. It's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, well, I think it's the bit that I put this little bit, it's just in a web page thing, it's tips for guitarists.
Yeah, right.
And it really comes from just little things that students sometimes ask, and and if I happen to come up with a really good phrase, then I can just distill it down.
Right,
and, and you see some people's, God, why on earth are you playing this piece? You can't play it.
Right.
Which might be okay if you want to learn to play, but don't do it in public.
Yes, I heard a great phrase from David Tannenbaum a couple of weeks ago where he says the piece is playing, we're talking about somebody, he said, well, this piece is still playing him.
Yeah, right.
It's like it's, now, moving, again, for tonight's program, there are many of your arrangements, and you've made just arrangements your whole life. And arrangements are such a part of our literature, you know. But I'm going to go to the most famous one, celebrated, I like to use the word, maybe it's better, of Asturias. So first I want to ask you, when did you first hear Asturias, and when did you first learn it?
You know, I grew up with my father's collection of records and things, so I heard Asturias before I was 1 or before I was 2. I don't remember, you know. And so that piece has been one. I want to learn this, want to learn this. And finally, when I got the first version, I was living in a little island in Spain, and my granny sent me the music, you know. And I'd kind of half learned it off the record of Andrés Segovia. And then the music was in another key, so I couldn't deal with it. But eventually I did learn other people's versions. And finally I made my own. I've made several versions of my own. And, you know, usually if you completely go back to the score on Asturias, there are some things that the piano version doesn't do. And it's all straight semiquaver, so it's straight 16th notes. Whereas on the guitar, a lot of it you can play as triplets. And it's a guitaristic invention that probably was done by Tárrega, and it works really well. So first of all, I took that out, but I put it back in.
Right.
So although I call it my version, if you like, but I use other people's ideas, you know.
Right.
Unashamedly, because they're good ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, would you say that arrangements in general, and your experience of teaching, et cetera, like something like this, or also Granados, the Vals Poéticos that you're playing, do you see them as sort of evolutionary, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the arrangements that were done a century ago have a different attitude towards the music. You know, they, say Tárrega and Llobet and things, they made a kind of, almost like a fantasy out of it. So they added stuff and they thought, okay, this is going to sound better on the guitar. And sometimes they were probably right.
Right.
But sometimes, for example, with Granados and with the Albéniz that I'm playing, I prefer to have the same attitude towards their music and have as much respect towards it as I do towards Bach or Scarlatti. Right. So I prefer not to change what they wrote. So if they didn't write a whole lot of little high notes in harmonics, I don't play them.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I prefer to keep it as close to the original as is possible. Having said that, I put the triplets in because I think it really is a good addition because the guitar sounds good like that.
Right.
You know? In general, you know, the problem with transcriptions is that if you feel that the piece is losing too much when you pass it on to our instrument, then it's better not to do it. And so probably for every one that I think is successful, say in Scarlatti sonatas, I've transcribed another 4 or 5 that are sitting in a drawer that you realize after a while, it's not going to work. It doesn't sound better than on the keyboard. Now, I'm not saying that my version is going to sound better than on the keyboard. I hope it sounds as good, because what you may lose from the keyboard version, you're going to gain by what the guitar can do, you know? And there'll be some things that are always going to sound better on the original, you know?
Right. It becomes actually, you know, I'm sure you agree, a new piece.
It should, yes.
Yeah.
It should.
And do you see, in that same line, do you see this differences in transcribing, arranging Baroque music to, say, Granados and Albéniz? Are there different rules for you that you apply?
Well, I think you could say there are 2 kinds of transcriptions. There's the kind where you have, a composer has given you a whole lot of notes that we can't play, say Granados, for example. Right. That piece is a big piece, so you have to distill it and reduce it, and hopefully maintain all of his harmonies, his voice leading if he's doing that. Then there's the other kind of transcription where, like, say, with the Bach partita, he has written a single line. And then we get to add something to it, sometimes a little bit of harmony, or sometimes by holding the fingering, we can create chords, etc., that on the violin, they're not there. But we have a really good example, which is Bach himself, because he did it with his own works, like with the E major partita is a lute suite, so we can see and we can study what he did. We call the lute suite our suite. Our third suite is a cello suite. And there he really did add quite a lot to the lute part. So we can understand how Bach viewed his, monodic music, the music that's a single line, and how he translated it onto an instrument that could include some harmony.
Right.
So that's kind of going in a different direction in the transcription.
Do you still feel, I'm sure you do, a great sense of exhilaration when you finished an arrangement and it actually works?
Absolutely.
Because it's such a voyage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's fantastic if you find a piece that hasn't been played or hasn't been transcribed and you're able to include it in your program. It's great. It's wonderful. And also, you know, some people say, well, why transcribe when there's a huge guitar repertoire, and especially nowadays, there are lots of works being written. They're fabulous. But I would hate to go through my whole life and not play anything by Bach.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't want to do that. So, you know, there it is.
And, you know, the joy, again, if you hear, I have, you know, in my class, they have to make an arrangement every other semester.
Good idea.
And they just, some of them discover these pieces that they just love. There's an air, and it becomes part of their repertoire in a very exciting way. Speaking of students, I have a question for one of my students. I don't think she's here, Katrin. But I asked her, you know, what would you like to ask David? And I'm going to sort of paraphrase, but she just said, given the amount of teaching you do around the world and the amount of students that you've seen, what do you think in this 21st century a classical guitarist really should be? You know, do you feel the music schools are serving them well in terms of, what do you think are the most, say, 3 important things they should focus on, you know, in this day? Is that?
Yeah, it's difficult to say what are the most important things. You know, I feel that, of course, colleges are much better for guitar than they used to be.
Right.
When I was studying, there was maybe 1 guitar or 2 guitar students per year, and we were really cornered because I was studying at the Royal Academy. The whole of the Royal Academy was much more aimed at the orchestra, the choirs, etc. You know, and so they had a whole lot of other lessons that we'd never got. You know, a repertoire that now that's changed. You know, and so all the students in the Royal Academy and where you're teaching and things, you know, they have more stuff.
Right.
Right. Whereas we just, you know, we had one lesson a week,
yeah.
and then you'd maybe go along to the harmony lesson to pass the exam. You know, we didn't realize how much those other few complementary subjects, how important they were, but still, they weren't given the importance that now I see they have. So I think now for the students, they have a much better situation than I did when, well, not me personally, but guitarists in my time.
Right.
There's another thing that I think I would say is important, is that all guitarists should go to other countries. Not because any one country is bad or good, it's that there are other views. You know, if somebody is born here and maybe has done their undergraduate here, they should spend a year in Italy or in Spain or in, I don't know, wherever, you know.
Right.
And because, for a start, if things go the way they want and they end up playing concerts, they're going to have to get used to living in lots of different countries.
Right.
And moving around and feeling comfortable in many places.
And speaking another language is,
That's another one. I think every guitarist should speak Spanish and English.
Right.
For a start.
Right.
You know, they're the 2 that I speak really well. So but, you know, I can speak with almost every guitarist in the world with those 2 languages.
Right.
Because of the guitar itself. You know, many people come from some unusual country. They learn Spanish because of like in Japan, there's lots of Japanese players that before they learn English, they learn Spanish because of the connection.
Interesting.
English is very important, of course, you know, but, you know, here nobody has a problem with English. But in some other countries, it is a big problem.
Yeah. And she had mentioned chamber music as well. I mean, did you get to do any chamber music experience in your youth, or do you find that you see more of that happening in students today? That's a positive.
It's a positive thing, but you know, I don't play chamber music much now simply because. You know, I spend 9 months moving from one place to the other, and you need to be able to rehearse with people. That you have to get to do it well. I mean, once in a while, I end up playing with someone. You know, it's a one rehearsal, and you just stuck it together, and you get. I mean, that's not really the right way to do things.
Right.
But when I lived in London, of course, I played chamber music with friends. I have a friend here that we used to play together, my violinist friend, and we played when we were students. We just often played and. It's a completely different experience from the solo playing.
Right.
And I know that I'm a soloist at heart.
Right.
So when I play with a group or something, I'm more than happy.
Right.
But you need a different mentality.
Right.
You know, you have to be a team player, and know how to be a team player.
Right.
And for me, it's not my comfort zone, if you like.
Right.
But you learn to do that partly by doing it, you know, and you soon find out if this is more satisfying than the other one, it's fun, you know.
Great.
And I've gone much more completely down the solo thing. But again, I say it's partly because of the amount of time I'm away from home.
Sure,
You just
sure,
can't rehearse.
sure.
You know.
Back to your solo, I would love you to walk us through your process of learning a brand new piece. What does David Russell do? You decide.
Who's he?
You know.
Well,
Because-
it's very hard. You know, the biggest thing is searching for pieces, you know, and so nowadays I try to get one or two pieces written for me, or I look through, because I love to include, I don't want to do it as a duty, you know, although sometimes as a player I think, well, we have a duty to the composers. I mean, you are both, so you can satisfy your own duty to yourself, just play your own music. No, there is an element of that, but apart from that, I think there's a lot of good music, a lot of good pieces being written, and it's up to us to choose, you know. So that's one part.
Right.
The other thing is there still are a ton of pieces that I haven't learned, and I would like to learn.
Right.
So once in a while, I'll choose a piece like the partita or something, and say, I really want to do this, and then you have to work the program around that, if it's a big central piece.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, it's just somebody sends you some music. Hey, this is neat. Oh, I'll put it in.
But your process.
Oh, the process of learning it.
Yeah,
itself.
the learning it.
Well, there are two differences, right? Two ways. It depends whether I'm going to memorize the piece or use the score.
Right.
Okay. You'll note tonight I'm going to use the score in some of the music and things. So that's maybe a slightly different thing. But if I'm going to memorize the piece, I have a memory system that works for me. And the idea is, once you've decided you're going to learn it, obviously you read it from the top a few times, you think, okay, I like this piece, then I start memorizing from the back. Now, there's a very good reason for this. You memorize the last bar, and that will take you a minute or whatever. You know, but memorize it, but you know, you read it, you turn the guitar backwards or play it against your hand or whatever, and play it in your mind, and then don't look at that anymore. And then learn the penultimate bar. Now, when you're learning the penultimate bar, you know where you're going. Whereas if you learn from the top, you learn the first bar, and you're always going into no man's land.
Right.
You know, you're always going in and making mistakes and doing it, you know, going into the. Whereas if you do it this way, you're always going into the part that you've already memorized.
Right.
Right. So as the bit that's, shall we say, more green, in front of it, I can see the bit that I know. So everything is in relation to the future, which is exactly what happens when you walk on stage.
Right.
It doesn't really matter what you've played. It's what you're about to play that is important.
Right.
So that for me has puts the things in the correct order. The reason why I said, and I don't look at it again, is because I know some people say, oh, I like the visual memory and things. Yeah, I have visual memory, but you know, I can see a blob there, but I can't tell if it's a B or a D or a C or, you know, I can't actually read the blob. I just know that there's a blob at the end of this line. That's not enough. Whereas when you walk on stage and you play something by memory, the only thing you don't have is the score. So you might as well get rid of the score and do it all in your brain much sooner. So I would say, okay, you learn, okay, we've done, say, 3 or 4 bars, and then just stop.
Right.
Okay, and just put in, imagine if we put 2 lines per day, every day of the year. We'd learn tons of music, really. Yeah. But, of course, I don't do that. But you learn a couple of bars, and then there's a passage between very short-term memory and 10-minute memory. You know, so you learn those 3 bars, and then we talk about something else, or you watch TV. You might have memorized it, or you might not. It might be for so you have to review it. Then you have one day to yesterday's memory. If you still can't remember it, okay, you have to review it, things. But you slowly put it into deeper memory. I go through that sort of system, more or less. I mean, I'm not completely strict on myself. You know, sometimes I'll do some bits in the middle, and I can realize that, here's a complicated bit. I'll memorize that bit first, and there's another complicated. I'll memorize those. And then, you know, your brain is much more agile than your eyes. You know, your brain can conceive a piece. You can just shut your eyes, that's the piece, you know, and you can see everything that happens in it in an instant. Your eyes, your page turns, you got markings, you got a whole lot of other stuff in there that gets in the way,
right.
Which you still have to do, because once it's memorized, then you go back and, oh, remember this fingering, you know, add in some dynamics, or, you know, add stuff. But that first process of sticking it in the fingers, I prefer to do it that way.
Great.
I don't know, that's a long answer.
No, it's fabulous, fabulous.
But then I'm going to walk on stage and use the score tonight.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Using the score, that is another discipline. So the advice would be use the score.
Yeah, well, you know, guitarists.
For instance, how much of tonight's score, I'm sorry, that is somewhat memorized?
Oh, it's all memorized. I can play it all by memory.
Okay.
So sometimes, I mean, it's a cheat sheet. You know, it's a little help.
Right.
You know, but you know, guitarists are notoriously bad sight readers. Although, no, you're really good. You're
terrible.
No, me too. But you know, with years, you say, got better. We get better. But some of the young players have realized pretty soon that it's important to read well. You know, if you can't read, how can you teach somebody a piece that you don't play yourself? You know, you've got to be able to see the 5 different possible fingerings for this complicated bit. You can only see that if you can read. So, you know, that's one of the things. And then the comfort of being able to play many, many more pieces.
Right.
You know, so that you can change your program more often. You know, not have to, you know, if not, you spend weeks and weeks and weeks just memorizing pieces when you can actually play it already.
There is, yeah. I mean, and I do notice from my students there is a little bit of phobia about using music, that it's not heroic. You know, that it's you know, and it's great. I think it's great that you use music because it opens up for the guitar. It's always such the stigma. You know, I have to memorize. It might come from competition, so I think it's beautiful that you break that for people.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to avoid the question of has it anything to do with age? But you know, I gave a chat. Somebody from the audience asked a question about the score. I said, well, I'm 60, so I can do what I want.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
It's just, I think we need to do everything that is necessary to play this music beautifully so that your audience enjoys it. Now,
including a dancing bear.
If necessary.
Yeah.
But, you know, a competition's a different thing. You go to a competition to prove your worth. You know, and the audience that you have there are sitting there kind of marking down what's not good and what's good, hopefully. But, you know, it's a different situation.
Yeah,
totally. So I think, you know, if a competition asks for the pieces to be memorized, well, memorize them, that's fine.
Right. You know? Great. I'm so nervous about going. How am I doing on time? I have about 30 questions more. 5 more minutes? Great. I want to ask you, you are not just one of my all-time, one of the world's favorites guitarists and musicians, but an extraordinary teacher. And you've been doing master classes for so long, and everybody's dying to study with you, and for many great reasons. Can you say, as funny as some things that you've learned about your master class teaching that are sort of Davidisms that just really work for you, or how does one become a good masterclass teacher? Because now we have tons of masterclasses. You know, in our day, they were so uncommon.
Very uncommon.
You know, I mean, I asked one student once how many classes she had done. She said 50. You know, it was like, I mean, insane. You know, anyway. But what are some of your points about a class?
Well, I think the masterclass should be a good complement to the other teaching. You know, so if somebody is your student studying with you every week and things, I'm probably going to say the same things as you're telling them week after week, but I am new. They come all excited about playing and things, and you know, it's a new situation for them, and hopefully that's going to complement what you've been working at. You know, but sometimes a masterclass, I hope, is inspiring for the student. I hope it's, you know, they may learn some specific details, which may be important, but usually it's more a mentality of how to study, how to view the music, and how to keep their enthusiasm going. Right. You know, and I feel that if at the end of the masterclass the student is excited about studying or about practicing or things, then we've done it. Yeah. Even if I haven't fixed their sound, or if I haven't, you know. But a lot of my development I did in masterclasses. You know, I had a teacher at the Royal Academy, but after that I had some really good teaching from masterclasses. And in some ways, I find it it's a really fun way to teach as well.
Yeah,
Well, you've done it all. And it's because it's exciting, the students are excited, and the whole situation is very different. So I don't teach anywhere.
Right.
So I would prefer to have a little bit of influence on a whole lot of people rather than a whole lot of influence on a small amount of people.
Right.
Because that's the way it's gone, really.
Right.
Which is okay.
Just to wrap up, I mean, I want to bring up something that we talked a little bit about in the dressing room. When you're not with the guitar, you feel very strongly about musicians doing other things.
Other things.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that, just as for our closers.
Well, you know, we spend many hours with a guitar between our legs, and sometimes the doors are closed. You know, we don't go out, or you know, and maybe as a student or just after you're student, you're trying to develop your career. Maybe it's necessary for a while, but I think that whatever you do in the rest of your life, you bring to your interpretation, and the more you open your own world, the more other things you do, the more variety you have in your personality and your musical personality. So I think it's absolutely vital for people to get involved in as many other things as possible. I would say until that is actually encroaching on your practice time.
Right.
You know, practice time is maybe 3 hours, maybe 4, but that's not all day. We tend to be awake for more than 12, and I only want to eat for 2 hours. So, you know, it's a lot of hours in the day. And so my wife and I, we'd travel a lot to different places. I love playing sport.
Very big, great golfer.
Well, golf is great for guitar. You know, it doesn't bash up your hands too much, you know, and you get to hang out with people that don't play any music and see another world as well. And photography, I love. My parents are artists, so I used to paint and draw and things, but it's hard to do in hotel rooms. But I can do photography wherever I am. And nowadays you can do Photoshop on your computer, you know, so I get to, hobbies are really great because I think they expand our minds.
Great. I cannot thank you enough. I know everybody feels the same way. And we can't wait for this concert to begin.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.